Meeting for January 11th, 2023 to order. Stefan, if you could please read the instructions.
Yep. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the commission, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the Transportation Commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Kovich, floor is yours.
Thanks, Stefan. Steve Brist, Assistant City Attorney Steve Brist is in the attendees. Could you move him into the panelist for me, please? I don't know how he ended up. I don't know how he ended up over there. It might be that Zoom update we were talking about.
Yep.
Okay.
Looks like he's here.
Thanks. Aiden, you want to call the roll? And as we've been talking about, we may have some folks who sign on a little bit late because of the length of the Zoom update. So go for it.
Sure thing. So Alder Miadzi, I don't see it. Alder Harrington McKinney, who I don't see yet. Ann Kovich.
Here.
Robbie Weber.
Here.
Denise Jess.
Here.
Patricia Bennett.
Here.
Harold Kleems.
Here.
And then Bridget Brown, Bill Bremer, Darren Wozniewski, and Chris McCahill are all excused from tonight.
Oh, here comes Alder Miadzi, it looks like. So we do have a quorum, and Harold, with the absences, you're clear on motions and voting, which you probably already figured out. As you recall, the Transportation Commission decided that from time to time it would be beneficial to invite members of the Disability Rights Commission to our RTC meetings in order to have joint discussions on certain topics. And we did invite them for item 9 this evening. So I see that we have a couple folks attending at this point, and perhaps others will join as we move forward. So welcome to both Transportation Commission members of the Disability Rights Commission, and everybody else attending this evening. So did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Harold.
Move approval of the minutes as submitted.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote. Unless anybody wishes to vote no or wishes for a roll call vote. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. Aiden, do we have any comments under number 1 for items not on the agenda?
No, we do not.
Okay, how about any disclosures or recusals this evening? Okay, seeing no hands. Okay, we have a number of referrals from the Common Council this evening. So we have items number 2 and number 7 proposed for the consent agenda. Any items which have members of the public registered to speak would automatically be separated. Do we have anybody registered to speak on items 2 through 7, Aiden?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, we do not.
Okay. Are there any of the proposed items which commissioners wish to be separated from the consent agenda? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no hands, let me just read the items in. We have item number 2, Legistar 74972. Item number 3, Legistar 75220. Item number 4, Legistar 75221. Item number 5, 75222. Item number 6, 75241. And item number 7, 75298. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Okay, was that Alder Miazzi who spoke?
Yes.
Okay, there's a motion. And Harold, I saw your hand up. Was that a second?
That's the second, yep.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain or roll call vote. Okay, seeing no hands, the motion is carried. Okay, so next we have item number 8, which is update and discussion regarding taxi cab business closures. I believe we have a couple of people who have registered to speak this evening. I would just note that we placed this item on our list of future agenda topics after Green Cab closed last November. And I know Keith Pollock had a prior commitment, was not able to be here this evening. Yang is with us. Yang, did you want to give any kind of introductory comments before we ask for comments from those who are registered to speak?
Sure. Yeah, but maybe really quickly.
Sure.
I think all the committee members, in some degree, aware of the situation, as well as the public members that be impacted by the service. Definitely, COVID, the pandemic has brought quite a bit of challenge to the industry. Along with the impact from the TNCs, the transportation network companies like Uber, Lyft. So has been very tough environment, for taxi companies to continue to operate, with lots of pressure. So late last year, Green Cab kind of pulled out from their operation in our area. And so they abandoned their license. And as far as I know, currently they're actually pulling out all the services. They're liquidating their assets right now. So we definitely lost one big company that has been providing a lot of taxi service to our residents and the visitors. And I also I want to say that the impact actually is bigger than just Green Cab itself, because over the past few years, Green Cab has made quite a few purchases of other companies. Including some companies, some bigger, some smaller ones, including some specialized companies, providing, specialized services such as for people with disability. So with along with Green Cab, so all those service providers are now gone. So I think some people, when I speak to like some of my friends, they thought, oh, this would be great news for other cab companies in the city, right? But in reality, this means that they become busier, but it also caused a lot of challenges for them because we all like all businesses and all industries, we're facing labor shortages. So it has been tremendously difficult to recruit drivers and retain them. Also the gas price has been very high. Another really big challenge. Here I want to take the opportunity actually to thank the companies, taxi companies, that actually continue to provide a service in our community, namely Union Cab and Madison Taxi. because these are really important services, right? We all sometimes take it for granted, but once we need a service and that we have issues finding timely service, we start to realize how important and how valuable their services are. So here I want to sincerely thank both companies for any other service providers providing this kind of service for them to continue providing the service to our residents and visitors during a challenging time. So I guess that's a kind of short background information. We'll be happy to answer any questions and hear the public testimonies on this. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Yang. Aiden, who do we have registered this evening?
So our first registrant is William Carter of Pennsylvania Ave, Madison. Neither supports nor opposes, wishes to speak, and is representing Union Cab of Madison.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Yang. He touched on a lot of the points that I was going to speak to as well. As soon as Green Cab and Badger Cab, because that was also one of the acquisitions. As soon as they announced that they were stopping taxi service, the calls the next day, of course, were to us. And we got lots of anxious and angry phone calls from people looking for transportation. We have heard some of the same things that, hey, that should be good. Your business is way up. But as Yang mentioned earlier, we are having the same issues that many businesses are coming out of the pandemic. We're having trouble hiring drivers, and also challenging financial times as it is for many businesses now coming out of the pandemic. So we faced a huge increase in demand, which put a lot of pressure on all of our services, our drivers, our phone answerers, and everyone else. And also, I just wanted to mention, I know some people think that taxis are outdated. They may think that TNCs are going to replace taxis, but taxis still do a lot of important work. Here locally, taxis do transport for the Madison Metropolitan School District. Taxis do a lot of work towards family care. That may be something that you need to look up, but we do a lot of work with people that are enrolled in family care. We do a lot of work for elderly people. We do a lot of work for people that don't have the credit card and smartphone to be able to call a TNC. So taxis are still very important, but capacity is down quite a bit, and I do think that we should be concerned about that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask for questions, and I'm also going to ask, hopefully there are no objections to us allowing members of the Disability Rights Commission to ask questions and participate in the discussion on number 8 as well as 9, because they really are related when we're talking about accessible taxi cabs. So if there's no objection, Joseph, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you, Bill, for your presentation. I was just curious for some metrics, if you'd happen to know the numbers of vehicles in the Union Cab fleet and the number of power wheelchair or wheelchair accessible vehicles. I think they're called the ATS vehicles, if that's accurate.
You there, Bill?
I just got the unmute button there. Sorry.
That's okay.
We have about 6 vehicles in our fleet, but a number of them are getting older and starting to fall into disrepair. Even though those vehicles are safe, as they begin to age, because of the equipment that are on there, they start to rattle, they start to make noise, and that tends to unnerve drivers and passengers alike. So we really have 3 vehicles that I think get the most usage right now. At one time we had 11, and we've been retiring them because a number of them are older, and we don't really have the funds to replace them the way that we did before the pandemic. So hopefully that answers the question. We have about 6, but really only 3 are being used most of the time.
Well, I really appreciate that, and just helps to give perspective of how bottlenecked, some of the resources can be. I know I've enjoyed using Union Cab for years, and it's also been an intriguing struggle, just with planning and booking, due to limited availability of the ATS vehicles. And so I think that's just a very poignant, item of discussion, just to get some of the metrics and some of the usage information. So thank you so much.
Okay, other questions for Bill? Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Bill, for being here and being able to answer questions. I think we now have a very good sense of what the problem is. From your perspective of being on the industry side of things, is there anything that you think would help alleviate these problems, and preferably something that we as a city can do?
Well, internally, we've had discussions about this, and we seem to be losing accessible drivers at quite a fast rate now, really for 2 reasons. One, the aging vehicles. As I mentioned earlier, drivers are nervous about driving older vehicles when they make a lot of noise, even though we have a maintenance staff and we do maintain the vehicles. They are safe, but perception is a huge part of everything. And when riders are riding and drivers are driving them, they make a lot of noise. People don't want to be in them. And the other thing would be compensation. You probably see in almost every profession now, you see people increasing compensation a great deal because they need to attract workers. In the case regular taxi driving, you don't come in as close of contact with the riders as you do with accessible. So really when the pandemic hit, that became an issue because drivers were concerned about how close they would be with passengers. But I guess getting back to it though, another thing that would help is if we could offer drivers a little bit more money based on the extra things they have to do.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Other comments? Oh, Alder Miadzi, go ahead.
Well, this probably is a question for Yang. But when we talk about paratransit, right? How would this be better alleviate the burden as far as paratransit? Are we seeing a lot more burden to paratransit because there's not accessibility, because of not enough cabs that has that disability capability? So I wanted to see if you could touch a little bit about paratransit and how this will be better going forth if this is approved.
Yang, would that better be aimed at Justin, perhaps?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, either Justin or Tom, but I think probably yes, I just didn't hear. So maybe yeah. So if it's okay, I'll pass on the question to the expert. Yeah.
I see Justin here. Are you with us, Justin?
Hey, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
All right. So sorry, I had some technical difficulties there and missed a part of that conversation, but I think the question is around impact on paratransit due to the closure of Green Cab.
No, yeah, what Bill Carter from Union Cab was talking about, losing accessible drivers due to the older vehicles and compensation. And Alder Miadzi asked, how does this interact with paratransit? And is paratransit feeling the pressure of Green Cab closing and some of the issues that Union Cab is having as well?
Yeah, so certainly there is some overlap with the accessible taxi cabs and paratransit service. But as far as whether or not we're seeing impacts directly now with paratransit, we have seen some uptick in demand for the paratransit service. But thus far, it's not been a significant issue for us. It was a marginal increase. And so I guess the answer is yes, we are seeing some increase, but it's not been overwhelming by any effect so far.
But Justin, could you also maybe talk a little bit about the difference between the paratransit and this on-demand service? As paratransit, you need like, for example, 24 hours in advance booking.
Yeah, exactly. So the exactly as Yang said, we have a requirement to provide to book the rides 24 hours in advance for the paratransit service, which that restriction does not exist for the taxi cabs, obviously. And so the taxi cabs do provide some additional flexibility that we cannot provide. And so I think, again, regardless of their impact on our paratransit service, I think it is certainly a worthwhile service in the community, just if nothing else, to provide that level of flexibility for folks that we can't provide by federal law. We are a zero denial service. So if somebody requests a ride, we have to provide that service, and we just cannot do that. And we can't allow same day bookings and still provide that zero denial guarantee. And so that's really where that challenge becomes for us in the flexibility way.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Bill, did you have a comment on that, Bill Carter?
Sure, I did. Since we're talking about capacity, and I know we're talking about taxis, but there's a larger capacity issue. Green Cab had also, or I guess it's really Zeroology, had also purchased Van Gogh out of Wanakee, which is a accessible service completely. They had 25 or 30 accessible vans in their fleet, and they'd also purchased Capital Express, which also had several vehicles in their fleet, and all of that has now been removed from the market. So we're on demand, and I'm familiar with the 24-hour booking. I worked at Badger Bus for a little while and ran the Metro desk, so I'm familiar with how that works as well. But ultimately, there's a finite amount of capacity for accessible transportation. So when those services, other services shut down, whereas someone might have been used to making that 24-hour request, now you have, less services, so they'll call Union and maybe try to schedule a ride the same way. So we've definitely noticed the pressure. Our requests went up almost immediately after Van Gogh and Capital Express stopped operating. So there has been quite a reduction in capacity. That part is fairly recent, so I'm thinking that in the next couple of months, you're going to start hearing more. You're going to start hearing more complaints about the lack of capacity in the area.
Okay. Thank you. Joseph, go ahead.
If I can clarify to Elder Miazzi's question and to Justin's notes that generally speaking, there are three primary types of services for ridership for the disabled community. So like paratransit is great for planned and routine rides. Like I use it for getting to work, getting to planned events, like, planned movies, planned outings with friends. But, the time where the accessible taxis really shine and are the only or optimal tool for me are times where I've either missed the connection with paratransit because, sometimes life happens and delay, for example, like anybody that's a parent, may have a time where, like your kids had an emergency and you missed a connection ride, or missed a pickup, so that sort of thing can happen and the cab can help to supplement that. Also, I've had plenty of times where I needed to get to the hospital, and this just happens day of, and The ambulance would have been an option, but I would have had to abandon my wheelchair wherever I was. And so then the cabs, really shone, like in their ability to ad hoc, come pick me up and get me directly to the ER. So yeah, there's just a variety of tools for the right job. So paratransit is a wonderful service for the planned rides, and the cabs are a wonderful service, for emergency rides or rides that are more ad hoc, or even rides that take a person outside the city limits. Like especially if I want to go to Sun Prairie or that, like I have a friend there, that presently the cab is the primary service to get there. Thank you.
Hey, very helpful. Thank you. Other questions for Bill?
Is my microphone is it still on?
It is.
So are we discussing item
We're on item 8 right now, and I was
okay,
hoping you registered for 9 as well. Did you?
I did. That was going to
Okay.
be my question, is because I know
Yep.
that we've already kind of spilled into that. So it's because I have some things written for 9 too, but I'll wait.
Sure. I figured that they would, and that's why, even though Keith wasn't available tonight, I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to open the conversation about what had happened with Green Cab and where we were with the market relative to taxi cabs and versus the TNCs, et cetera. So if you could hang on, and then we'll ask for your comments about 9 when we get there. We'll hear from, I believe Eric is also registered now. So we'll see you back again for 9. Thanks, Bill. Aiden, who do we have next?
So it's Eric Brecky of Gilson Street, Madison, neither supports nor opposes. Says does not wish to speak, but is available to answer questions, and they're representing Madison Taxi.
Okay. Thanks for joining us tonight, Eric. Do people have questions for Eric from Madison Taxi? Joseph, go ahead.
Hi, Eric. I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind presenting us just with, some of the statistics and notes, of like Madison Taxi's fleet and its ability to cover, like disability transit. I mean, whether wheelchairs or folks with other impairments.
Hey guys, sure. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes. Thanks, Eric.
Okay. Currently, we are only set up for ambulatory rides, which we do a lot of, particularly for bail and things like this. So I'm more or less here to hear you guys out on the next proposal. We have a fleet currently of about 30. Like I said, we do a lot of medical transport, a lot of hospitals. We have contracts with everybody, but as far as wheelchair accessible, we're not actually equipped for that at this moment. But I'm all ears as to the proposal on this.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Okay. Denise, you had your hand up before. Did you have it's up again. There you go. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. It's still up. Yeah, Joseph, thanks for the question. It dovetails mine. So Eric, I know that if my understanding is accurate, you have a large contract with the Madison Metropolitan School District, and so doing a lot of kid transportation. So what's your capacity for other rides besides fulfilling MMSD?
Sure. That's an excellent question. So we pretty much have blocked off every morning and afternoon between the hours of about 6:45 a.m. to about 10 a.m. before we can clear all that out, because there's so many kids going everywhere. And then again in the afternoon from about 1 p.m. till about 4 p.m. before we clear all that up. But in the interim, we have a pretty decent amount of capacity in the middle and after. But during those hours, we can't hardly cover what we have. So, yeah, that's a really relevant question there.
Okay, other questions? I have one, but I'll wait till other people ask what they may have. I'm just curious, Eric, you mentioned you do a lot of medical transport. Some of the articles that I had read mentioned that Green Cab did a lot of medical transport. Have you noticed a change in that aspect of your business since they closed?
Definitely our contract with Vail has ticked up a bit. They tend to kind of lean on us as I hate to say last resort, but I think we're a little bit pricier than some of the other smaller private people that aren't operating as a taxi company too. But with the implosion or whatever happened with Green, definitely they have been reaching out more than in the past. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Other comments or questions for Eric under number 8? And we'll probably hear from both Bill and Eric again on number 9. Anything else on number 8? Okay, Bill, you have your hand up. Is that from before or?
That was from earlier, yes.
Okay, all right. I didn't seem to be able to take it down, so I just wanted to make sure. Oh, Alder Miazzi, did you have another question?
Not really a question, but I was in on this at the beginning of the process. I just wanted to add myself to a sponsor for this because, I mean, I think Joseph raised a very good question. Not a question, but talked about the importance of if people were just going to their appointments. I mean, that is such a crucial, rather than just being planned. So I think that's important. I just wanted to add myself as a sponsor to it.
Is that for number 9, Alder Miazzi?
I think it was.
We're just finishing up on 8 right now. Number 9 is the accessible taxi cab resolution.
For 9.
Okay, great. And we'll have Alder Paulson talk about that in just a minute. Is there any other comments or questions? We've talked about in the past reviewing the taxi cab ordinance. And, if I haven't heard anything from either Bill or Eric that there was anything in the ordinance that we could do that could help them. Their issues seem to be related to other things. And we may have to, there may need to be other avenues to assist in that regard. So is there anything else that we should be thinking about doing? I mean, the Transportation Policy and Planning Board obviously works on ordinance changes, but we're the ones who implement them. And, if we have something we want to refer to them, we certainly can. Harald?
Yeah, I have a question and then maybe a comment. A question for Yang maybe, or if anybody else can answer it, that's fine too, and you may not have an answer. Do we have any sense of what the situation with TNCs is? Like, I think there was a lot of talk early in the pandemic and when gas prices were really high that a lot of TNC drivers pulled back because they were basically not making any money anymore. And so, I mean, do we have any sense of the local situation? Is there anything they can do to pick up the slack? And this is not specifically to medical transport and all of those things, but I mean, taxis provide a valuable service to many people. So I'm curious if we have any sense what the situation with that is.
Yeah, that's a great question, Harold. Yeah. So, TNCs are a lot of licensed by the city. So, we don't have much control over them at all. So they don't do any reporting with us. So we, I guess, we cannot, officially see how they're doing and tell how they're doing. But just, some anecdotal, feedbacks from people that I know and from my own experience. I do think they have been impacted as well, but I think to a less degree than the local cab companies. I think the labor shortage definitely impacted them too as well, and the cost for them also came up. They've been increasing their price as well. So they do they do provide a lot of services, for our community. But I think Harry, you're also correct that I'm not aware of any who is providing accessible service. So, and you also have to have the technology to be able to use it. So there's definitely like a barrier to enter. You have to have your smartphone. You have to have a credit card. So not all the members of the community can actually use that option. So, great question. Thank you.
Yeah, Harold, let me just say that I just know from personal experience that I happen to use SSM Health for my healthcare. And when I go to eye appointments and have my eyes dilated, I can't drive. So they have this option where you can get medical transport, and the contract for medical transport for them is with Lyft. So, maybe some of the TNCs are filling in some of the medical transport side of it. At least apparently they are with SSM Health. And I don't know how, many other medical, what other healthcare facilities are using TNCs in that regard. But that was something that I found very interesting because I hadn't used Uber or Lyft before. So.
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting. I had no idea that was the case, but yeah, again, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I figured we wouldn't have any hard data on this, and so, but still, was a question worth asking. I guess the common part of this is that, yeah, I mean, we see there's all kinds of problems with the current situation, but it also seems like we as a transportation commission and as a city maybe have somewhat limited options of fixing that. I think just drawing some connections that I see here, I mean, we've talked a lot about Vision Zero and how much drunk driving is driving fatalities and serious injuries. And I think the availability or not availability of cabs certainly plays into that as well. So I think this is a problem from a Vision Zero perspective as well. And then the other piece to it is, of course, metro service. I mean, there's no perfect overlap between those things, but like, I think it behooves us to think about like, what can we do that metro serves as many people as possible. I think we have the metro network redesign, which will hopefully help with that. We have BRT, but yeah, thinking about what can metro take on, where are there gaps where we, for example, I mean, a lot of cab traffic is, I think, probably late at night where bus service may not be an option. And so I think keeping it in our mind, like, yeah, what can we do if we can't fix the cab problem? What other avenues are there to provide people transportation options to get to where they need to get? And,
yep.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Harold. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Harold. I just wanted to make an anecdotal comment to your, as a user, primarily a union user because I want to see union thrive. But there are times that I'll use Lyft, and a number of my colleagues use Lyft and Uber as well. And the wait times definitely, increased for them since the pandemic, and rates definitely took a pretty steep uptick with those services. So affordability is really a significant issue. But the one thing I want to just call everybody's attention to is that the TNCs do a lot of denial of service for anyone using a service animal, even though they're not supposed to. I had a staff member in my office in tears this morning because once again, she was left standing outside her health clinic because the TNC denied service because she has a service dog. So it just reinforces the criticalness of the taxis because, and I encouraged her to start using Union because the dog is not going to be denied entry into a taxi cab.
Oh, interesting. And the city has no regulatory authority over the TNCs, correct, Yang?
That is correct.
Yeah. Great points. Thanks, Denise. Alder Paulson, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple things. One, I'll just toss on an anecdote on TNC's. There's a independent tech journalist, Timothy Lee, Lee, and he drove for Lyft for a week and compared what he got paid, and he asked all of his passengers, "What are you paying?" And just kind of tried to understand a little bit more of the economics of Lyft. And obviously, it's a one data point, and it doesn't account for their other contracts. But it was an interesting article, and it didn't actually bode well for Lyft, looking at kind of their current costs and trying to figure out how it's going to make it as an ongoing concern. So, but that is a adventure for a couple of years down the road that we don't have a lot of control over. And if Uber and Lyft run out of money, what happens, and how does that how does this all snap back to cab companies? If cab companies are still left, it'll be a challenge, because obviously people in the community, a lot of folks just drive, and have their own cars and drive most places. But as a community, we are encouraging people to use mass transit. We're encouraging people to walk. We're encouraging people to bike. These are all great things. But occasionally, right, you need some other option. And taxi cabs and TNCs are so complementary to our transportation system. To have these, to have the ability when you need it to have a point-to-point ride is very important. And just one other bit of anecdote, from a visitor tourism business travel perspective, for a while, because of airport construction and because there just aren't a lot of cabs, there would be times when you go to the airport and there aren't cabs there, and it's difficult to get a cab. Or I know my own husband came home one night and was going to take a Lyft home, and it was like an $80 ride.
Oh, no kidding! From the airport?
Yeah, because they're just right. It's the algorithm and surge pricing, and there weren't a lot of drivers, so you could get there. But this was like 11 o'clock, and so I got a phone call, "Come get me," because it was cheaper than $80. So, but great. I think from just from a a Madison as a place to do business, and Madison as a place to visit, this is also a big shame on us. Like, what kind of city are you going to if I can't even get a cab there? I expect this in rinky-dink towns, but you're a state capital. Why can't I get transportation from the airport? So I think it's a challenge. And like Harold kind of mentioned, gosh, I don't have a lot of great answers here. I was hoping maybe there's some, if we could make one ordinance change, everything would get solved. But the health of our taxi cab companies are important, just like the health of our hotels, and just like the health of our restaurant scene, and the health of so many of our other businesses. And we could be in trouble if they don't make it, because it's so complementary to everything else we do. So so I wish I had more to say other than wringing my hands, but
Alder, if I could just, Denise, can I ask you to I don't want to put you on the spot, but you had a conversation about how many people actually don't drive, and the number, Alder, was staggering to me. Can you share just general information about that, please?
Sure. In my role as co-chair of the Wisconsin Non-Driver Advisory Committee, which is a project of WisDOT, we worked with WisDOT to analyze DMV driver records and use a bunch of big data. And we know that 31% of Wisconsin's population are non-drivers. And this includes children. And we include the children in the stat because children need to get places as well and are dependent on some form of transportation to get there. So 31%.
Yeah. That's a much higher number than I expected it to be. So something interesting to keep in mind as we're talking about this. Rebecca, go ahead. There you go. Okay.
Thank you. This is Rebecca Hoyt. I wanted to respond to the question about regulatory authority. In addition to Lyft and Uber and other app-generated transportation not being within Madison's authority, I think disability activists have had difficulty enforcing accessibility requirements that would normally apply to transportation on the federal level, because the company is presented as technology rather than transportation. And that defense has held up in a few cases. And they largely are an app rather than a transit company. So some of the challenges that people with disabilities experience in accessing those services are likely to continue, whereas taxi cabs are a transportation service. I just wanted to clarify that.
That's very odd, because clearly they're providing transportation. Huh. Very strange.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you. Interesting. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, following up on one point that you brought up with the airport, which, I mean, it's a small piece of the puzzle, but I think it's also an important one in terms of solutions. I wonder if it would be worthwhile having a conversation with the county, because, I mean, the airport is a county facility, and I think they have always been very proud of the airport and a connection to outside the world and all of that. But, for example, I don't think, I mean, they build parking garages, but they do not fund bus service or anything else. So I wonder if it would be worth talking to the county executive or something and laying out, here's a problem for the airport, which serves the whole county and beyond, and see if there's anything that can be done in terms of solutions there.
Yeah. Interesting. Justin, any comments about other types of bus service to the airport?
So yeah, with the network redesign, we'll actually have better service. I mean, the service will come about the same frequency, but that service will take you kind of all the way across the isthmus rather than just to the north transfer point. So we'll see some improvement there. And then we'll see some later night service. We did have some preliminary discussions with the county about funding some additional service there. And I think they had some level of interest, but we never really advanced it. I anticipate revisiting that, but there was just far too much going on all sides to really get it to the point where we could execute something. But I actually just reached out to them for some other partnerships that we discussed around Cottage Grove, and we're working to set up a time to talk again. So I anticipate that conversation will continue to advance, but I can't guarantee where it will go.
Yeah, but another good avenue to pursue. So yeah. Thank you. Justin, go ahead. Or excuse me, Joseph, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and just to clarify the next piece of information I'm going to bring up in a thought. So I work for Dane County Information Management, but I've worked on human services projects since 2008. And initiatives like Comprehensive Community Services and Children Come First heavily used the taxi services. Van Gogh was a popular one. So that might be another angle to discuss with the county of, like what options, will dually serve the city's needs and help supplement the county's needs to provide those services, So I think there's some interesting discussion that could be had there.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that both Bill and Eric have their hands up. Normally we don't go back and forth with registrants, but we're having more of a conversation here. And if there's no objection, I would like to hear what they have to say. Is there any objection from anybody? Okay, Eric, you want to go first and then Bill?
Sure. I just wanted to say that some of the situation here isn't as doom and gloom as some of you might think. We actually acquired a lot of the green drivers and dispatchers, even mechanic staff. So by them dissolving, Yeah, we took on a lot of their work, but we also added a lot of their workforce. So keeping them employed. I'm not sure what the situation was at the airport this day or night that the alderman couldn't get a cab. I mean, we do have a problem in that we have so much contract work now, which is a good problem to have, that we can't always keep a big lineup at the airport, but generally the airport's pretty well covered. I would add, maybe this is considered a minor point to some, but one idea to maybe service the airport a little bit better is if some of the staffers out there treated our drivers with a little more respect. Sometimes, in fact, they're treated almost subhuman. Just last week, I think 2 or 3 drivers came to me with tickets they received because they went inside to use the bathroom. So that's a 2-minute endeavor, and they come back in these difficult times, and suddenly they have a $30 ticket. I don't know if there's anything you guys can do about that, but I just wanted to say that we have a pretty big force out there in the day. We are able to cover the airport better at night than we used to because our staff is bigger. It's not perfect. There are some times that it's a little bit of a drought out there, and it's unfortunate that sometimes people have shown up and there's not cabs there, but we do a pretty good job between us and Union, I think, of keeping that covered. I don't think it's a super drought out there. I just want to say that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Bill?
Guess I'll speak quick to what Eric just said, because that was interesting that he mentioned that we're having those same problems too. I have drivers that are complaining about going to the bathroom and getting tickets there as well. And I find that interesting because Destination Madison had approached me some time ago about the lack of transportation at the airport. And of course, they're in close contact with the airport. So the fact that they're looking to have us out there more, but then we're running into that treatment is interesting. But I had actually raised my hand because you mentioned regulatory for TNCs, and that when it was mentioned that they're not a transportation company, you found that interesting. That's actually a strategy that TNCs pursued in order to be able to avoid local regulation, was to call themselves a tech company and not transportation. So they're there and they're competing with us really for some of our better rides, but yet they're not considered to be transportation. So then when they get pushed to do some of the other things that we have to do, they're able to avoid that.
Interesting. Alderman Yazzie, go ahead.
I was just curious. There's no place to park temporarily to use the bathroom. I'm just curious. I'm concerned about that. So just wondering, is there a place to park while people go to the bathroom, or I guess it's for Eric or Bill?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is my mic still on to answer that quick?
We hear you.
Okay. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a spot that they can pull, but they have to abandon their place in line, which nobody wants to do. It's like, sometimes you wait out there for a while trying to make money, nature calls, and now you to the back of the line you go. So it's not a super great solution. For a while, they had a porta potty out there, which was at least semi-human, I thought. And now that's been removed. Correct, Bill? There's nothing out there now. They have to go inside and lose a spot, I think.
Correct. Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
If you guys could send me an email so I can follow up and see what can be done about that, I'll appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah, Eric and Bill, if you want to email Alder Yazzie, he's District 18. So maybe that's great. Thanks for offering to help with that, Alder.
Well, thank you.
Okay, other comments or questions on number 8, something that we may want to revisit again in the future, because a lot of great ideas and a lot of things that we may want to discuss again. Anything else on number 8 before we move on to number 9, which is obviously clearly related and which we've sort of been talking about already? Okay. So item 9, establishing a grant program to support accessible taxi cabs in Madison. Alder Eric Paulson has distributed preliminary draft. And as I mentioned earlier, we invited members of the Disability Rights Commission to have a joint discussion on this topic. And if there's no objection from any of the TC members, we'll ask members of the Disability Rights Commission to participate in this discussion and ask any questions of registrants and offer feedback, ask questions, and give make recommendations as well. But first, I'd like to have Alder Paulson give us some background and a summary because he's been working quite a while here on this. And it would be great to just sort of lay the land and then hear from registrants and then have a discussion. So Alder?
Sure, thank you. The text got into Legistar a little late, so I apologize if you haven't had a chance to read it, but let me just kind of give a little bit of a background on it. It's actually kind of straightforward. We've heard, one of the things that's missing from some of the fleets is just vehicles, and that's a challenge to simply get folks out there. All right, so there are cabs on the road, but many of them are not accessible. So it may be easier for me to be able to get a cab, but it's not necessarily easy for everyone to be able to get a cab. And so the gist of the idea is let's help the cab companies upgrade their fleet to add some wheelchair accessible vehicles by simply helping them make that purchase, because they're considerable capital investments to buy a cab that has the ability to load in a wheelchair. And so the idea is kind of straightforward, that the city would establish a grant program that cab companies could apply for, and they would be awarded money to buy accessible vehicles. And the idea is to spend to make a grant of about $250,000, which we figure would add about 4 vehicles to the fleet. Maybe we could get it for 5, but starting out there. And it would be open to any of the licensed taxi companies in Madison. And we're kicking around a little bit of exactly how to do it. The idea is right now is to just keep it simple and just turn around and treat it as a grant, but add a lien to the vehicle. So if they stop using it, the city can reclaim the vehicle. We're interested a little bit in, if we took a different approach, if the city bought the vehicles and then leased them back for like $1 or something, but the city maintained ownership. That's something I think we're still talking a little bit about with some staff. It feels maybe that's a little bit too complicated for legal and insurance reasons, but it's still an idea percolating. But the core idea is that if there were more accessible vehicles in the fleet, it would be easier for people who need a accessible ride to be able to get one, just because the number of cabs on the road that can service that would go up. And understanding that the vehicles can be used by someone who doesn't need the wheelchair access as well. So the vehicles are kept busy all the time, so they're fully utilized. But when you call and need a cab, it's more likely that you can get one. And for all the reasons we talked about before, that paratransit is an important service, but sometimes life happens and you need something on shorter notice, and so paratransit isn't an option. And we've been hearing that sometimes when you call, you can't get one, and there are a number of other problems. We just heard that recruiting drivers right now is really tough, and so this only maybe a little bit helps with that. Maybe if new vehicles, drivers are interested in driving it, but so this is not meant to solve the problem completely, or I wish it could, but it's not. But I think it is a helpful step along the way to make it a little easier for Madisonians who need a vehicle, who need a ride, and can't use the who can't get one because there isn't a vehicle on the road that can accommodate them. So that's the quick overview version. So I appreciate your attention, and we'll talk more when we get into the discussion. And you're still muted.
I must have hit mute by mistake and forgot to unmute. Thank you. Joseph, we would normally hear from registrants and then go into discussion and questions and comments. Can we wait till after we hear from the registrants and then have you come back? Okay, great. So Aiden, let's go to registrants. I'm assuming it's Eric and Bill again.
It is William Carter again.
Okay.
Pennsylvania Ave, Madison, supports, wishes to speak, and is representing Union Cab.
Okay, Bill, go ahead.
Hi. So I figured that I would talk a little bit about the Common Council's history of dealing with accessible transportation, just as some background for people that may not know. In 2004, shortly after the American with Disability Act was passed, the Common Council addressed the need for accessible transportation. At that time, they were prepared to require all of the cab companies to have accessible transportation. And it's my understanding at that time that the cab companies were against it for the obvious reason of the expense of it. And this is still written in the ordinances. If anyone wants to read them, 11.6, 7A and N. It was written in to require cabs to have accessible transportation unless something happened before a certain date to not make that necessary. Union Cab stepped forward at that time to provide accessible transportation, so those ordinances did not go into effect. About 10 years later, the Disability Rights Commission recommended again making cab companies have accessible transportation. But at that time, the council was concerned about TNCs and the effect that they were having on the financial health of taxis, and rightfully so. So nothing was done at that time either. Of course, now to require it, I don't know that, and I can't speak for Madison Taxi, but that would be very difficult. We already have a service, so it would be very difficult if we had to go out today and purchase vehicles and do something like that. So I'm in favor of this. I think that the council is right to be concerned about where this is going, and I think that it's also a good thing that they want to help accessible transportation in Madison.
Hey, thanks, Bill. Does anybody have any specific question for Bill right now? I'll ask Bill to hang with us. So if, in case we do want to hear from him later on, we can do that. Any questions right now for Bill? Okay, thanks, Bill. If you wouldn't mind staying, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Aiden, do we also have Eric?
We do not. There were no other registrants for this item.
Oh, okay. Did Eric stick with us? It looks like he's still here. So if we...
Yep, Eric is still here. He just didn't register to speak.
Okay, he does have his hand up. Are people okay if we go ahead and allow Eric to speak? Any objection? Let me say that. Let me say it that way. Any objection to allowing Eric to speak? Okay, Eric, go ahead.
I'm just kind of on a listening mission on this one myself. I mean, we have some concerns here, obviously. I mean, I think it's a good idea. I think it's a very noble idea. You know, I don't know, you know, I guess we're waiting to see what strings are attached to this. You know, there's pretty big liability risks involved here. I'm sure we'd have to have some special training, extra insurance, things of this nature. Probably a different pay structure for the drivers that do this, as well as a different charging structure for these types of rides, because there'd be more work and extra training, these things involved, expenses, etc. So I guess I'm all ears here to hear how some of these holes will be plugged so we don't have these concerns. You know, it sounds like the vehicle would be covered, which is nice and noble, but the other problems still exist there, the potential problems. It's a great risk. So I'm just here listening, and if anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer them as well. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so why don't we go ahead, Joseph, if you had your hand up earlier. Did you have a comment or question?
Yep, more of a comment and some clarification. And so first, I wanted to thank Alder Paulson. Thank you for your work for putting together this grant, and I really like the idea. And I think it's a great, starting point and talking point, to help start looking into how we can address, some of these accessibility challenges with transportation. To clarify to the commission of, where some of the expense and money, just what the numbers might look like. I got a accessible Chrysler Pacifica, 2019 Chrysler Pacifica from A&J Mobility out of McFarland. And so there was the base cost of the van itself, which was roughly $30,000. And then the accessibility modifications of installing a self-deploying or manual ramp and a lower chassis, and that came in at another $30,000. So that's where you can start to see some of the $250,000 that Alder Paulson noted, that if you're buying a new vehicle, especially minivans are the common use, that comes in about $20,000 to $30,000 for the base vehicle, and then another $20,000 to $30,000 for the modifications to make them wheelchair accessible. So I thought that might just help to have some of the discussion and get some of the math and metrics of what this project might look like. And to Bill and Eric's notes, in my many years of interacting with cab drivers in the ATS vehicles and even the wonderful, helpful paratransit drivers and mainline metro drivers, the extra training of properly securing a wheelchair and just, the hands-on support and delicacy of interacting with the individual needs, like as both Bill and Eric brought up, is a really interesting logistical challenge that not every potential driver is eager to address. So that can be an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Alder Paulson, go ahead.
Yeah, I just something I should have mentioned in kind of my intro. What I'm hoping to get tonight is feedback as broadly or as specific as anyone wants to get into. Is this a good, just to clarify, this is a amendment to the capital budget. So it is just the vehicles. The capital budget can fund stuff, but not people. So it wouldn't be any, unfortunately, subsidies for riders or extra bonuses for staff payments or anything like that. We can buy stuff, and we have some flexibility in buying stuff as a city. So that's the sort of financial question here. And so in one sense, the question is, if we were to spend $250,000 to help accessible transportation in Madison, is this a good use of it, or is there other things that we should be examining? So that's something I would love to get some feedback from the TC and the DRC on. And if there are specific questions, I should mention that I think it's, if you had a chance to read the resolution, we're kind of basing this off of the way the federal 5310 grant program works through the MPO and for accessible cabs. And so it would there'd be a scoring system, and sort of what the life cycle here is. The resolution goes through TC and DRC, and then the finance committee and the council adopts it, and then staff and folks will work on a scoring system, which the TC would approve. Like, here's the there'll be a grant program, it'll be housed in transportation or somewhere in the city, and the grant will come out, and folks will come back with cab companies will come back with their application. The scoring system would be approved by the Transportation Commission. It'll be based on the 5310 grant proposal, which has some criteria, and we could dig that up if folks are interested in taking a look at that. And then the grant would go out. So I think we're interested in early on if there are things that the TC thinks should be included in the scoring or in the requirements for the grant. we're interested in metrics like, how many, rides do you think you'll be able to give? How often will you be able to keep this vehicle on the road? And looking for those sorts of criteria and feedback from TC on what is possible there. And then just one last thing for action tonight. I'm hoping that you'll refer it to your next meeting, so we can take that feedback and Tom and Justin, and then Ben Lyman from the MPO, and Rebecca from Civil Rights, and Keith when he's back in the office, and then there's some other folks from Metro. There's a bunch of staff who've been working on this with us, and we'll also refine it and bring back a second version to you at your January 25th meeting. So I'm happy to answer questions, but I would love to get as much feedback from Eric. This is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Throw it away, to Eric, it's perfect. Don't change a thing. But I'm hoping there's somewhere in the middle that there are improvements. So thank you so much for having me tonight.
Sure. Great. And I think I've got several hands up, so I think you're going to hear some feedback. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, Alder, thank you so much for putting this forward. I really applaud you for doing it. So I have questions and I have comments. So the first thing I just want to say is that so frequently for people with disabilities, we have to, the system is designed to make us wait and wait at a disproportionate amount of time to our non-disabled colleagues and peers. So the effort behind this, if it helps diminish the wait time to make it more equitable to what someone else who wasn't using a wheelchair or needed specialized transportation, then it's worth it, So thinking about what those criteria might be, that would be, I like that you're thinking about it along a 5310 kind of framework. I have to think more about the criteria. I wasn't prepared for that, so I'll do some thinking about it. But I have a question. Maybe it's best directed to Bill. In talking with a rural transportation provider recently, she was really grieving that her vehicles, while wheelchair accessible, weren't heavy, weren't durable enough or powerful enough to manage the really heavy power chairs. And so folks who were needing just to do something simple like going to the doctor were needing to get there via ambulance. And that was just so deeply disturbing to me, because can you imagine going to the dentist and you pull up in an ambulance, the lack of dignity. So I'd want to make sure that the funding is sufficient to really make sure that there are vehicles in the fleet that can really manage those high weight chairs, and the ones that are taller and, with enough headroom and enough ability to manage the weight. And then, so that's a question that I have for Alder and for Bill. And then my comment is to Eric. I'm just going to invite you to think through the comment you made about maybe there's a higher fee structure for folks using these vehicles. I think that's how I heard you frame it. And I really want to gently and kindly challenge that people with disabilities should not have to simply pay more because this is how we showed up on the planet than our peers who do not have disabilities. And there are so many instances where we do need to pay more, and it's a significant equity issue. So I'm thinking of my criteria, I guess, as I'm talking. So, that would be one of the things is that for this criteria, Alder, is that the company makes the commitment that people with disabilities who are using accessible vehicles are not paying more than their peers who are not using a wheelchair adapted vehicle.
Okay, and can I just clarify, Denise, that I think your question was aimed at the Eric from Madison Taxi, not Eric Alder Paulson. Is that correct?
You got it. Yep, it was. And then my question for Bill is, does the 250 cover, a vehicle that could really manage the heavy weighted power chairs?
Okay, so let's go with Bill first with regard to the question about the heavy power chairs, and then we'll go to Eric about the fee question. Bill?
Okay, so I think you make a good point there. So when we talk about Union's fleet right now, we have a number of older vehicles, and this all has to do with what we can afford to purchase. And it's true that a number of the vehicles that we have do not hold the larger wheelchairs, and that is something that we would like to change. So again, going back into history, shortly after Union agreed to do accessible transportation, at that time, Union qualified for the New Freedom federal grant, and Union applied and was able to buy new vehicles with that grant. They changed that grant to 5310 and changed the requirements, and then Union was no longer eligible to get that grant. So once that happened, then Union had to use its own funds in order to be able to purchase accessible vehicles. And then, like our cabs, we purchase used vehicles and then we turn them into taxis. So we have that same thing happen with our accessible vehicles. So I guess speaking to the question, if we were to have that grant, instead of purchasing used vehicles, we'd purchase the new state-of-the-art ones, and we'd be able to handle those larger chairs. And I would go quickly into the fees. Union Cab charges the same fees for accessible rides as they do for regular taxi rides.
Okay. Can I just follow that up? Joseph was talking about approximately 60,000, if my notes are right, for a vehicle. Bill, would that cover the larger, heavier wheelchair accessibility, do you think?
Yes.
Okay, great. And Eric, that would be Eric from Madison Taxi. We have two Erics here tonight. Would you like to address the question about differentiation in fees that Denise asked?
Sure. I mean, this was just me shooting from the hip here, contemplating potential problems. And I can foresee that drivers, they always want to be paid more for more work. I mean, that's just kind of natural human behavior there. And then for us, we take on considerably more risk, more insurance, all these things. So I hadn't actually contemplated self-pays. I get your point, and I agree with you. But a lot of these situations end up being funded in some other way, whether it be VAO or some other program that frankly has the money. Otherwise, I don't know if it could be. I mean, I think it was already answered that it can't be subsidized in some way. But I can tell you from a reality perspective here that it would be very difficult to get drivers to do basically have a slower process, a harder day for the same money, which would ultimately be less because you can't, churn over the number of people. I mean, I'm just stating the reality of knowing what it's like dealing with people that want to make maximum money. So I mean, I'm just hearing out this thing. It's got a lot of good to it, but I can foresee some potential problems, including, I mean, having to like force certain drivers to do this stuff. I hate to say it like that, but I know that's what it would be if they don't in some way make more money by taking on more risk, slower rides. You know what I mean? This is just, we have to run a business and these guys want to make as much money as possible. I don't know who's going to make up the difference. You know what I mean? Whoever gets assigned to doing this, or multiple drivers or whatever, might do half of the rides that a normal driver will do. And so I'm the one that's got to deal with drivers complaining if they're not making enough money. And I know that we can't afford to pay a driver twice as much money for the extra effort. So this is a potential problem. That's all I'm saying.
I would jump in and say that you're right about that. We actually have that experience right now, especially coming out of the pandemic, and that's why we're losing drivers. Is that drivers do want to get paid more. Some of those drivers also feel like they're missing out on some of the more lucrative fees, and that would speak to the smaller fleet where the accessible vehicles really need to be held back for that service, so they're unable to participate in some of the other rides, even though those vehicles can be used for regular taxi rides. But we have to have them available. So we are right into that too, and that's why I mentioned earlier that we do need to pay those drivers more if we expect to bring some of the drivers that have left back and attract new drivers in the future.
Okay, so that's a problem, an issue with the model. Denise, did you have any follow-ups, or does that cover your questions?
That covers it, and I think that points to that will be something that will need to be problem solved, so the burden does not have to weigh with the person with disabilities.
Yep. Okay, thanks. Rebecca, you're next.
This is Rebecca. I just wanted to address the comment about training. While the Department of Civil Rights is not well equipped to provide the technical aspects of training in terms of securement and things like that, we do provide training to any business or entity, either a public service or private, that's interested in providing excellent customer service to people with disabilities. So that is something already built into our system. I also wanted to comment on that this is, I think, a good opportunity to fill in gaps for folks who may not be eligible for access services or are eligible, but it's not practical because indirect routes and ride sharing typically makes trips longer, which is very challenging for people who have toileting needs to access even paratransit services. So I think there's a separate population here that this benefits that isn't being served at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Harold, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. I think, yeah, this is a great initiative, and now we just have to make it work in a way that actually makes a difference. So I have a couple of questions and comments. First question, so it sounded like these $250,000 might be enough for 4 to 5 vehicles. I think somebody earlier mentioned like how many accessible vehicles on the fleet right now. So I'm just trying to get a sense of how much of a difference for the practical experience is having 4 more vehicles going to make, especially if it sounds like maybe that just means that some of the old ones will be retired. Therefore, in the immediate term, maybe this will not make a difference at all.
You asking that of Bill? Because the Union Cab is the one, or Alder Paulson, or both?
Probably whoever can answer it.
Alder, do you want to try first?
I'll take a first shot at it. In just refer back to Bill's answer, that they've got 3 that they run regularly, then they could run up to 6. Madison Taxi is not running any. This would potentially add 4, so either more than doubles or adds another 60%. I mean, it depends a little bit on who applies and how it gets split up, and how that works out, and if both apply, if only one applies, and so on. So, and then it's complementary to other services that are out there as well. So not just paratransit, but then there are the VanGo and those sorts of services as well. And there is a 5310 grant working its way through with Union. So this is in conjunction with that, and Bill would have to explain kind of where they're at on their 5310 grant.
Okay, thanks. I think this answers my question already. So, I mean, basically doubling or more than doubling the fleet potentially, that's actually quite a bit. So that's great to hear. I'm wondering, do we know how other cities have handled this, how they have set up programs? I mean, I know there have been cases of ADA lawsuits leading to settlements. I think the most prominent one being New York City, where there was some sort of settlement where they had a requirement to make X% of the cabs accessible by a certain time point, but that might be the outlier. But yeah, I'm just wondering, what can we learn from other cities who have tried to tackle this problem? The other question that maybe this ties into having a grant versus having a loan problem, and you alluded to this question, like maybe the city should own the vehicles and lease them back or something like that. So yeah, I think trying to figure out how other cities have tried to tackle that might be helpful with this.
Is that something that you know, Alder? I mean, or Yang, do you know anything about? Does anybody here have any answers to that particular question?
I do not. So I can say that I do not have answers to that. And I have not dug into how other cities have approached this. So
yeah, so that might be worth if staff could maybe do that at some point and just see if there's any inspiration, especially when it comes to the metrics that you pointed out. I mean, I think we want to be, yeah, I mean, I don't have any immediate ideas how you can set up the metrics, and then what if, you know, the company promises something and can't fulfill it, then it's too late. So I think there might be something to be learned here. And then I just, final point, I just want to reemphasize what Denise has said. Like, yeah, I think for the user of this must absolutely not be more expensive. I get the point that on the company side, that might be a problem, but we got to fix that and not fix it by having the users pay more for using the service.
Thank you, Harold. Alder Miadzi.
Actually, my answer was kind of answered, but you know, another thing I was thinking about is that it'd be nice to actually have an itemized statement of what everybody thinks that the expense might be for training and so forth. And who knows, probably even, I mean, since this is a capital budget thing, probably even think about adding something to the operating budget if this came down to it. Because I think this is a necessity, you know. But yeah, just food for thought, you know, since we're talking about this, I think it's important to try to get an itemized statement about how much this probably cost extra.
Yeah. Alder, you asked about training. Justin, you had mentioned something at one point during some email conversations about Metro's training that they do with paratransit drivers. Is that something that we still have Justin on, or did we lose him? Oh, it looks like we might have lost him. So that's just something that I would say that, you know, certainly Metro has excellent training programs, and, you know, I don't know what their training programs or how they might be available to other people, but that's certainly a resource that we could at least talk with them about training, because certainly they do that training for their paratransit drivers. So not exactly the point that you were making, Alder, but that's certainly something that we can look at. Okay, other comments, Alder?
Oh, that was it.
Okay, thanks. Joseph, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something to Denise's note and to Harold's note of why, you know, like equity in terms of paying, you know, like for services, you know, is such a challenge for the disabled community that, I mean, well, some expenses are already higher for the disabled community. Plenty of folks, myself included, being on Medicaid programs for the daily health care I need just to live, just to get out of bed. There are income restrictions that are significant, like the Medicaid purchase program has an income restriction of 250% of the federal poverty level. I mean, the calculation's a little more complicated than that, but it equates to like roughly 50,000 per year, plus, you know, like all the medical expenses I would have, you know, and such. And others are in even more tight, you know, financial situations. So, you know, having increased fees for disabled patrons, you know, can be a truly undue burden.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no, I my nephew's disabled, and I understand exactly what you're talking about, Joseph. So, other comments or questions? I have one. Alder Paulson, in your draft resolution, you talk about what available matching funds might be or what matching funds might be available from any applicant for these grants. So I have a question for both Bill and Eric from Bill from Union and Eric from Madison. Do you have funds available to help match any kind of grant? And my guess was that would be hard in light of the, economic adversities that we've been discussing and we talked about under number 8 as well. So that's a point that I wanted to bring up and talk about because I wasn't sure that requiring matching funds was going to be something that would be very viable for the taxi company. So if we could hear from Bill and Eric from the taxi companies. Bill?
It would be difficult right now to have matching funds. I know 5310 has those types of requirements, and just in the financial environment that we're in right now, it's tough. But that would, if that's what wound up being the proposal, that's still better than where we are now, where we're shouldering all the costs. But it would be difficult to, I don't know what you'd be talking about in terms of matching. I think 5310 does an 80-20%. But especially right now, it would be difficult for us to do that.
Okay. And Eric?
Yeah. I mean, it's no secret that COVID completely crushed us all. It's a miracle that we're even here. So it's not a good time for us to reach into the private coffers. We don't have the money. I mean, simple as that. We're crawling back. I think everybody, the union's crawling back. I'd also like to say that we've done our very best to keep costs down. Union is running quite a bit more expensive than us already, like $1 a mile more. So we try to keep costs down for everybody. We would have to launch our rates substantially, just like I believe Union did, if we were somehow mandated to fund this or something like that. No, there's never a whole lot of extra money floating around in the transportation industry, and particularly now, that would be terrible timing. So there.
Okay, thanks. So Alder Paulson, I just wanted to make that point that I wasn't sure that requiring matching funds would be something that I thought that requirement might make it more difficult for it to be successful. Harold?
Yeah, along those lines, I mean, one thing I'm wondering, and I don't know what the city we would have the authority to do that. Is there some way to have a surcharge on all fares? Like, in some cities you have to pay like 50 cents, something recovery fee to have like as an ongoing revenue source to go into that, so that all users of cabs would chip in to improve the accessibility of them. So somebody more familiar with both, I guess, our ordinance and what the state allows us to do. I wonder that might be worth exploring.
I don't know, Yang. Is that something I have not heard about that. Have you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm writing it down right now. I think that's a good idea, but I have a feeling that we might be pretty constrained for fees in our political environment. But I do think it's a good idea, and we'll look into it. Also, okay. Along with what other cities are doing, like Harry pointed out previously. Keith may know something, but we'll check it out.
Thanks, Alder Paulson.
I was going to say perhaps Attorney Brist might know what we have for the ability to add any sort of surcharges onto taxi rises, which is a separate question if it's a good idea.
No,
but
you saying that no, we don't have that ability?
Off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Okay, well, it's something to explore. Any way that we can offer more accessible transportation, certainly something to explore. Uh, so there's been a lot of great discussion, Alder Paulson. Any other thoughts for Alder Paulson? Or Alder Paulson, do you have any questions for members of the commission or either commission, the TC or the DRC? Or Eric or Bill from the taxi companies?
No, this has been very helpful for me. Some things to look into, and then that we'll be able to go back with some staff and Alder Miyazi, who's going to co-sponsor this, hopefully with us, and continue to revise this and bring something forward for your next meeting. Metrics, Denise mentioned that, we kind of sprung this on her, and I do, and I certainly appreciate that if either you can mail Yang or Ann or me directly with things for metrics, or there's a clause that's kind of like, what are we looking for in the scoring system, right? So that's where the matching thing was. By the way, matching wasn't required. It was like that was tossed it in as like, maybe that's something we want the scoring system to consider if there was matching. I'll say that kind of one of the very early ideas was, what if we said this is funding to upgrade a cab? If we say, okay, the usual model is some kind of sedan or smaller car, that's the base, and that's $20,000, and if you're going to have a cab on the road, that's what you're going to pay. But we'll kick in the extra money to upgrade that to a minivan, and then with the accessibility features there, so it's kind of everyone's in there, which is one way to potentially do this. And I guess I'm not going to put the cab companies on the spot. I was a little nervous that if we require that, they may say, well, we're not going to buy any new cabs this year anyway, so nothing's going to happen. And so to sort of sweeten the deal, I was thinking, it's like, well, okay, we'll just get to the whole thing, because we recognize that there are these additional challenges of once you got the vehicle, that's only part of the struggle. But and so as anything we're doing to sort of disincentivizing them to at least get the vehicle so it's on the road, was potentially an obstacle. But I think it is a big question, and that's something that hopefully the TC can kind of wrestle with, and we can talk about next week. It's from what we heard from the cab companies, if we buy this, then are they going to be able to get it on the road? And is this going to make a meaningful difference? Or is there a way we can spend this capital money on something else, anywhere else in the city to help this in some other way? And so that's ultimately the trade-off. We're fortunate that the budget implication isn't as killer as the operating budget here. So it's really more of a question of, is this the best use of funds, rather than is this the only use of funds? So yeah, I think ultimately what we're hoping to get from TC is TC and Disability Rights Commission here is this program workable, but then also, is this a good use of city resources? Like, if this is this a good investment or not, compared to other things that we could imagine. So thank you so much for everything tonight. And I'm
sure. Joseph, go ahead.
Just a question for Bill and Eric, that just for illustrative, where we were talking about fares and challenges with that. I know, for example, Union Cab has a prepayment option where you can make an account and say put down $100 that you could spend out over time. And I'm just wondering if accounts like that may hypothetically help to even out some of the fares and some of the challenges and some of the operating budget.
Bill, you want to start on that one?
The accounts don't necessarily help us with, because it requires more administration in order to handle an account. So there's more office staff in order to keep track of accounts, to keep track of authorized riders, the billing functions, and all those kind of things. So I don't think that really
Okay.
helps. And also, I guess earlier there was a question about charging a surcharge. If you look in the ordinances, this would again be 1106 9 under rates of fares. There was also something written in there about charging more for accessible rides. Of course, that never came into effect, but that is in the ordinances that you can read.
Okay, thanks. Eric, did you have comments about Joseph's question?
Of course, we have accounts like that. We have a lot of accounts like that, but it's not like they're charged anymore. And I think Bill really nailed it. It actually is more expense involved. Glad we have those contracts because it uses a lot. But yeah, there's a lot more expense involved in those. So that's not like some put it away in the coffers thing. It's just general revenue. As far as the surcharge thing, I think we're just throwing more on the consumer now in already tough times. And as I said before, we're trying our best to keep the prices down, which is very difficult to do as, you know, gas prices go up and the expense of everything else. I'm actually feeling bad for the people of this city, what they have to pay for taxis at this rate. I feel, Frank, sorry, Bill, you know, I love you, but you know, I feel worse for the union riders. I don't even know how that's affordable to go to work at these rates, and I'm not even a fan of ours. So I really don't like the idea of surcharging everybody as a solution to this. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Alder Paulson, I have a follow-up question on the criteria. My impression was that the resolution would go through, hopefully. I've been hearing from people I think it's a good idea, so I'll lay that out there. And if anybody disagrees with that this isn't a good use of the city's money, I've been hearing a lot of good thoughts from people that we need more accessible transportation, and this might be a way to accomplish that. So please raise your hand and comment if you don't. But my impression was that the actual criteria for the rankings and applications, et cetera, how to finalize that would be done after the resolution was passed and come back to TC. So, you know, if you have any ideas that, you know, certainly, you know, email us and we'll get it to Alder Paulson. But then please include that with regard to criteria, but that's not necessarily needing to be resolved right now. Would that be correct?
Yes. That there's we certainly aren't going to try to have the scoring sheet completed for this resolution to move forward. But anything that we can give a little bit extra guidance, I think, is helpful for my colleagues on the council to see this, because this will be something that they'll ask questions about. So if there are things that we know we want to ask about, I'd like to be able to include it as at least in the list of possible things we're going to ask about. So they can see that when they're looking at this, and you know, so they are looking at, you know, is there matching money? Like, so we can include it as it's a possibility that it's something that would be included in the scoring. I think it's just helpful for that to move forward. But yes, the resolution envisions that ultimately TC will sign off on the final scoring criteria and have an opportunity to revise that then. Okay,
great. So other comments before we move along? Okay, so I would entertain a motion to refer this item to the January 25th, 23 TC meeting. Harold?
Maybe a question to Alder Paulson. I was looking at the timeline and it looks like it's going to be at DRC on the 26th. So that would be after our next TC meeting. So I wonder if it would be better to refer to the 1st February meeting.
That was, I guess I'd rather keep it moving along. That was part of the idea of having some of the folks from DRC here tonight, so we can get some initial feedback. But you know, we'll get more feedback from a regular process. It just worked out with the calendar that there was these 2 meetings, and Chair Kovich was gracious enough to sort of let us come in and have early discussions. So rather than having one kick at the can here. So.
Okay, then I move referral to the January 25th meeting.
Okay, Alder Miazzi, is that a second?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And is there any discussion? Further discussion, I should say. Okay, Alder Miazzi, you have your hand up. Is that still from the second? Okay, great. We'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. Please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. So great discussion, and Bill and Eric, thanks for hanging with us through both items 8 and 9. It was very helpful to have you here and have a little bit more informal discussion. Very, very helpful. And Alder Paulson, thanks so much for bringing this forward. You know, we've heard, as we talked about the Metro network redesign, about concerns that once the network is redesigned, that there might be less accessibility for certain folks with disabilities, yet to be determined. And this might be one way to perhaps help offset that. So I think that's, you know, Denise, we talked about that quite a bit. And, you know, I think this is another reason why it's good timing to think about a program similar to this. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody. Any last thoughts before we move off this one?
I just wanted to take an opportunity to say thank you to TC. I know that there's so much city process that we wind up saying, okay, and TC will take care of the actual implementation. And so I just appreciate everything you all are working on behalf of the city. So thank you.
No, thanks for recognizing that. Implementation does take a lot of work, doesn't it? Yeah. All right, thanks. We'll look forward to seeing you again at the next meeting. Okay, let's move on to item number 10, which is new speed limit, stop, and yield signing work report. It's Tom, and there's Tom Moore. Okay. So Yang and Tom are both here tonight, so.
Yeah. You want to go ahead, Yang, or do you want to
go ahead?
Okay. All right. So yeah, Tom Moore with Traffic Engineering. And I'm here to present just some information about, let's see, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay. The previous year's kind of more important signing, I guess we're considering. So we've done this the past couple of years where we provide statistics on the speed limit changes, and stop signs, and yield signs, and then just general signing work orders. So I'll just briefly go through this. The speed limit changes, these were mostly what we brought with through Vision Zero and through Safe Streets Madison. So that's up here on the top. And then we have the new stop signs, and we included an ID so it corresponds to the map that I'll show next. Most of these are uncontrolled intersections that are going to two-way stops or T intersections. For each, typically these are done through requests that we get, and then we will do, depending on the situation, a brief study of the intersection and make a decision. So it's not as formal as an all-way stop study, but we do look at each intersection and look at the conditions and the crash history and the volumes and make a decision about installing new stop signs. This past year, we had one location where we switched the stop signs at Jerome and Winnequa, and that was based off of resident feedback. We had a meeting with the neighborhood, and everyone was in favor of switching it. This is close to Monona High School. So we made that decision. It's rare, but it does happen. A couple of yield sign locations at the bike paths, and in the past year we didn't have any removals of stop or yield signs. So here is the map of the speed limit changes and stop and yields. Nothing really too interesting here. Some of the new developments on the outskirts of the city, both on the west and the east sides, where we're adding new streets that sometimes we'll put in stop signs right away. And we just have some general stats about the signing work orders that we completed. So we had 1,671 sign work orders for 2022. The vast majority of those are repairing signs, and then down at the bottom is a breakdown of those sign repairs. But the install new, those are typically for requests that we get from the public. Install for a completed project, that's typically like a street reconstruction project. Our shop also delivers barricades and signs for special events. And we'll remove signs for contractors when they're doing projects. And then for the new developments, we fabricate street name signs and sometimes stop signs that the developer will install as part of a new street. And then repairs, maintenance, these are similar to the damage repair, I think. It's just one of the fields that we have within our asset management program that sometimes gets filled out. But since we've been using CityWorks for the past couple of years, I did include this additional information just to compare to the past 2 years. So the numbers are pretty similar year to year. But yeah, that's all I have. If you have any questions, I think we're bringing this to you just to keep you informed of what we're doing each year. But, I could take any questions that you have or comments.
Or comments or questions for Tom? Carl, go ahead.
Sorry, clicking too many times on the hand button.
I was going to say, I thought it'd go up and then down and then back up.
A question about the damage repair work orders and like those 660 signs that got knocked over or are leaners. Are we able to recover some of the cost for that? Because I mean, I'm assuming it's a lot of snow removal, knocking over things, but then also people driving over signs. Are we generally able to get some of that back, or is that basically the cost of traffic?
I guess I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. Are we having other people pay for it, you mean, or?
So yeah, those 660 signs, replace, knock down, or fix leaner. I mean, I'm assuming that's caused by somebody driving into it or something like that. And then are we generally able to recover the cost from the insurance or from the driver? Or because I mean, that's a lot of signs and a lot of budgetary impact.
I am not sure. Yang, do you know? I think I would assume that the vast majority were just kind of eating that cost, because we typically, it's something that we get a call from the public that, hey, this sign is down, and we don't really have any idea what happened, or we just kind of react to it. Yeah.
Yang, do you have any info on that at all?
Sorry, I was multitasking. Happened to got something in the email. Could you repeat the question?
I was wondering, like, some of these knockdowns, I mean, are probably the result of crashes or somebody backing into signs. And so I was wondering if the city is able to recover any of the cost of these. I mean, I know in many cases, probably, yeah, we will not know who caused the damage, but yeah, I just wanted to get a sense.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Yes, so we do recover some of the costs for some incidences where we can find the party at fault. But for other cases, we were not able to get someone responsible. So for those cases that we don't, but we do have an insurance policy that which helps quite a bit to pay for some of the expenses.
Okay, great. That's helpful to know. I was not aware of that. Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions for Tom and Yang? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So why don't we treat this like a report and ask for a motion to accept the report? Alderman Yazdi?
Motion to accept the report.
Robbie, is that a second?
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion at all? Okay, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks very much, Tom and Yang. Interesting information. Let me just ask, because we always need to ask this question. Was this interesting enough information that you would like to see it again next year? We said we were at Yang, we said we were going to try it out for a couple years. So people find it interesting and helpful, or something that staff should just keeping track of and only come back if we want to see it again in the future? Or what are your thoughts? We're seeing it annually now. Harold?
I wonder if one option would be, I mean, I feel like the speed limit changes, as Tom said, I mean, they were largely in the context of Vision Zero, and they seem to belong into that realm. So I wonder if that part could be wrapped into, I'm sure we're going to get updates on Vision Zero. And then maybe once we do that, I'm not sure if there's enough left over to warrant a full report.
I was wondering the same thing. So Yang, Tom, your thoughts about that? And then we'll get Alderman Yadzi's thoughts.
Yeah, so we are planning to include this as part of our annual Vision Zero report that we're going to do. I'm talking about speed reductions. So the same information will be there as well. And for the for our first annual report, since our action plan was approved in March last year, so we're trying to finish up the annual report in the first quarter of the year. So we're targeting maybe release that sometime in April. That's a current timeline, but it's always challenging to collect a lot of data. And some of our control that ask a lot of colleagues in the city for data, and with everybody struggling with staff shortage, it's kind of hard. But we'll try our best to get a report out as soon as possible. Some better time, TD can review it to see whether you would like to see these reports coming back in the future. So thank you.
So it may be duplicative with the other report, is what you're saying.
Yeah, at least the speed reduction part of it. Yeah, that report will not have the science
right.
of it, but those are regularly those are relatively I guess cannot find the right word for it, but it's kind of relatively routine.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. And will the Vision Zero report come to us, Yang?
Yeah, we plan to release. We're targeting April release. So
right, but do you think it would come to the Transportation Commission for review?
We can definitely bring it here if the commission is interested. Or at least we'll make it available. We'll distribute to TC.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be an option to have that report distributed to us and not require this report. Alderman Yadzi, for your thoughts.
Well, the last thing that Yang said, that if the report is coming here, I mean that's I don't know if that's up to you, Chair. If that's your request that it come here, then we can actually take a look at it when it comes there instead of duplicating the process.
Yeah. It's I'll be interested in your thoughts. I mean, Vision Zero is something that TC is very interested in, and we don't always get to hear about how decisions that we make work in the future. And hearing the Vision Zero and seeing the Vision Zero reports will help give us, I think, some thoughts and some feedback about how some of the decisions we made in the past are working. So I'd be more in favor of seeing the Vision Zero report come to us than this particular report, because I think we'd see all the speed limit reductions. And if there's an issue with the stop sign, I'm sure Yang and Tom would come and talk to us about it. So what are your thoughts? Perhaps we switch it up in our work plan and talk to Yang about, where would we put it in and how would we put it in terms of seeing the Vision Zero report rather than this particular speed limit stop and yield signing report. Not that we didn't find it interesting, Tom, but, we don't want to duplicate work. And, I think we want to, we trust staff to bring things to us that need to come to us. So how do you feel about that? Looking at the Vision Zero report rather than this particular report?
I would love to see that happen. I mean, the Vision Zero is something that Yang championed. I heard about it way up in DC when I was at National League of Cities. So I would love to actually see that report.
Yeah, Yang, your thoughts about that?
Just my 2 cents. I definitely feel like the Vision Zero annual report will have much more impact. It's going to have a lot of more information. So speed limit reduction is going to be a part of that. So I would think that report will probably benefit the TC members more, and also in turn will benefit staff more. By spending time discussing with TC on those. So yeah, we'll gladly kind of make the switch if TC is inclined to do that. But definitely, we'll be happy to bring this report back as well, right? It does offer some interesting information, but we'll also be glad to stop doing this if if you think that's okay.
Yeah. Well, we're going to need to make some changes to our work plan when we look at incorporating complete green streets into it, when we look at incorporating transportation demand management into it. We have a lot of things that TC is being asked to do differently because of these great initiatives that we have seen recently approved. So we'll need to take a look at our work plan, and I'll put this with my papers on that. And I'm thinking that maybe this would. It sounds like people. Let me know if you disagree. It sounds like people are in agreement with adding the Vision Zero report to the work plan and deleting the speed limit stop and yield signing work report from the work plan. So if so, we'll put that into the draft, and then it'll come back to TC when we look at the work plan. And Yang, obviously, I'll work with you on that. Okay, other comments or questions? So I believe we had a unanimous consent vote there to accept the report. So if there are no other comments, we'll move on, and I'll put this with my work plan papers, and we'll look at making some changes to that. Okay, item number 11. Well, they canceled the Transportation Policy and Planning Board meeting that was scheduled for January 9th. So there actually is no update on that. So pretty easy to deal with number 11. And besides, we don't have any crossover members here tonight anyway, although we do have Tom Lynch with us. Unless, Tom, you had anything else you wanted to add, Mr. Lynch?
That's all right. I've been multitasking.
Yeah.
We had a relatively light agenda, and so that's why the Transportation Planning and Policy Board was canceled. I am working on my end of the year operations report, and for me, that's always kind of an interesting thing because it kind of it does outline the accomplishments that we've done this year, which is which are many, actually.
Huge.
They're huge. And so I think but then it also kind of outlines trends that we're seeing, like where are traffic volumes growing, where are they not, where is parking occupancy high, where is it not, where are bus volumes going. And so to me, maybe that's just a little curious thing in my mind, but I like to see what's happening because we have to plan for the future, right? And so so I'm actually kind of glad that the TPPP got canceled because I'm not done with her report. But so we'll have that information probably in February.
Okay. Anybody have any comments or questions for Tom?
I will say two relatively big items are going to council on January 17th. One is approval of the bus rapid transit main package bid, which is a pretty big deal. One is approval of the accepting the FTA grant, and then also the transit oriented design. So all of those together will be a long meeting, but they're pretty consequential.
A lot accomplished over the course of the past year. Yeah. Any other comments or questions for Tom? Okay, thanks, Tom. In terms of announcements, we had there was an appeal filed for MPD's denial of a taxi cab permit. So under the taxi cab ordinance 1106 that was mentioned several times during our prior discussion, as TC chair, I've formed an appeal subcommittee consisting of Denise, Darren, and myself. So we're working with Keith, and we have a meeting on January 18th to hold this hearing. And so I'll report back to you. I'm going to chair that subcommittee, so I'll report back to you in the future as to how that goes. But I just wanted to let you know that that had happened. So that was the only announcement that I had. Any other announcements that anybody had? Okay. Future agenda items. Those are posted in Legistar. We'll obviously have the grant program for accessible taxi cabs back again on the 25th. That's anticipated. Several public works projects we know are planning to come here on the 25th, and the potential exists for Safe Streets Madison to come on the 25th as well. So any items that you didn't see on there for the 25th or on our future agenda listing that anybody wants to add? Okay, seeing no hands, we need a motion to adjourn. Our first meeting of 2023 in the books. Alder Riazzi and Harold, motion and a second. And I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote. And thanks so much, everybody. Great discussions tonight. Appreciate it. Take care.